All right, we're back with another big episode. This is part two, following up on last week's episode on the gender wars, where we really dove into feminism, the patriarchy, the battle of the sexes, and healing the rift between the masculine and the feminine, looking at it from a cultural perspective more so. And in this week's episode, Rage Against the Machine, we're going to dive even deeper and actually look at the external factors that are contributing to the war and the quote unquote war between the genders. Is it really a gender war or is it really a war on gender? And we're going to look at the biological and chemical aspects of this, the systemic aspects that are pushed through the medical system itself, and the deeper esoteric aspects that have really contributed to this rage that is bubbling up in the collective. We're seeing this. I've been seeing this. I've been witnessing it and feeling it myself, feeling this energy of rage bubbling up to the surface, but witnessing other people talking about it, other people sharing their experiences in both my personal world and out in the social media sphere about their process of really grappling with this deep inner rage. And yes, it's mostly women, but what I want to do is zoom out and look at the aspects from both the feminine and the masculine side of things of why both are kind of justified in their sacred rage and who the rage should really be directed at. Because right now we are being pitted against each other, the masculine and the feminine. And yes, this is an internal battle as well. The masculine and the feminine polarities, the masculine and the feminine energetics that we all embody. But this is also externalized in the males and the females of the world. So there's a lot going on here, and it's a huge topic. So I'm going to do my best to do it justice. But I also want to address the fact that I am releasing this episode 2 days late. By the time I post it, it'll probably be 2 days after my typical post date of Tuesdays. And yes, I have been going through my own deep process, not just rage, but grief. And usually underlying the rage is a layer of grief, but I've been processing really, really deep stuff. I'm walking the walk myself, and when we're in the process, personally, I don't feel ever like I'm in the space to be able to sit down and record an episode like this, to put myself out there. I feel I have to be integrated and grounded enough to be able to hold my energy in order to share. And I think that is part of what we need to look at and reflect upon, because a lot of people are out there spewing their stuff in real time on social media. And personally, I don't think that's really helping. So we're going to get into all of this, looking at synthetic hormones, environmental toxins, suppressed soul rage going back really far into the lineages, but also into past lives, and how to reclaim our power through integration. But we're also going to look at the medical system, the birth process, circumcision even. And then, of course, the deeper, darker, esoteric aspects of the targeting and suppression of the feminine. And why we're seeing this bubbling up so much right now in the surface is because it's coming up and out finally to be reckoned with. So, yes, this is really going to look more at the biological and chemical warfare aspect of what's going on, what's contributing to this polarization and separation, but also disconnection from ourselves, and why we're experiencing that visceral pushback against the system, against the machine. So, thus, rage against the machine. So, the system itself is desensitizing us to our natural states while pitting us against each other. And that is the crux of what I want to examine and the core of what I feel we really need to anchor into here. So, this is again that classic divide and conquer agenda, and they're manipulating us on every level of our being to do this. So, the manipulation itself is really crafty, really insidious, and it's kind of like evil genius level, honestly. But this is so much deeper than just identity. This is so much deeper than the quote unquote gender wars and battle of the sexes that has been quote unquote waged for decades, centuries, millennia, however you want to look at it, right? So this is beyond manipulation of the media and social and cultural narratives. They're targeting us through food, through medicine, even the water and the air that we breathe. So again, this is getting back to what the real core issue is and who the rage should really be directed to. The oppressive systems and structures that are really targeting us on every level of our being from the moment of conception and birth. So, as soon as we're birthed into this world, we're birthed into, and even conceived, we're birthed into an unnatural world. And the way the medical system is now, it's an entirely unnatural process. It's really quite traumatic for a new soul coming in this way. So, I want to start by looking at the endocrine warfare and the chemical castration first. So, let's start with some facts, some baseline facts. There is a decline in testosterone occurring in the collective right now, and it's really quite concerning. So, average levels have dropped significantly in men over the last few decades, and some have suggested a 1% yearly decline since the 1980s. And when we compound that, an alarming decline. And so we've got to really take a step back and pause and think, okay, well, if the testosterone levels are declining that much, what is that doing to the men? How is that affecting their behavior and the way that they show up as men? So this is a really, really fundamental layer of the issue at hand. The battle of the sexes, the men not stepping up in a masculine way or in a toxic masculine way. Well, is it because there's actually something messing with their actual natural biology that is causing them to behave in ways that are not entirely natural to the masculine when it's truly embodied? Sperm counts have likewise declined over 50% since 1973, according to an NIH meta-analysis. That, again, highly alarming. And then we look at the declining birth rates and the rise in infertility issues, and often that's placed on the women. But we've got to also recognize that the men are facing a chemical, biological battle that is being waged in silence and often completely unacknowledged. And so, how much of this is because the sperm themselves are not fully healthy? And their counts are low. They're in the female egg will reject a sperm that is not healthy, that is not viable. The female has barriers and boundaries when it's in her pure natural state. The egg itself will not allow in a sperm that isn't viable, generally speaking. And so, is that part of the reason we're seeing a decline in fertility, a decline in birth rates all across the board, right? At least in the Western countries in particular. So then we also have the issue of phthalates, BPA, parabens, soy, pesticides. Their estrogenic impact and gender neutralizing effect can also not be ignored. Our hormones are affected by all these unnatural materials, these chemicals, these plastics. And so if this is happening for both the men and the women, how much is this messing with our own biology and our own attraction, our own ability to be fertile? It's actually far more significant than we're really giving credit to in the collective conversations right now. These are conversations that we really need to bring to the fore if we're truly going to solve things and move forward and make progress on both the energetic and the biological levels. So, plastics, tap water, they're both completely contaminating our bodies. Microplastics are being found in the blood as well as the placenta, as well as the bloodstream of infants. Fluoride, huge issue there. It's shutting us down. Atrazine completely messes with the hormones. They've done experiments with frogs where the frog will literally, when exposed to enough atrazine, switch genders. That's concerning. Why is there atrazine in the water, right? So this is linked to chemical feminization specifically. So it will make a biological male more female. So then you have to really question this whole gender identity and the sexuality spectrum, the rise in gay feelings and transgender and this whole confusion of the whole spectrum of sexual identity. It's really confusing, honestly, to me. And I think that there is, not to deny anybody's personal reality, but I do think that there is a deeper biological chemical warfare layer at hand that we're not addressing. And then we have the manipulation of the menstrual cycle itself. So, the birth control pill, we've got to have this conversation more often as well because informed consent is a necessary aspect of true care, right? So, how the birth control pill severs women from their natural rhythms completely, by definition, that's what it does. And it really flattens hormone variation and it may even disrupt mate selection. There have been studies over the years where females' preferences change when they're on the pill. And so maybe they're not actually selecting their natural mate. So, what if this is contributing to the rising divorce rates because women have been chemically suppressed to their attraction to their true biological match? And this is such a deep conversation. I'm asking questions. I'm not trying to pretend I have all the answers here, but these again are questions that we need to be investigating a little bit more deeply. We need to be having this deeper inquiry collectively with each other and really questioning the entire medical establishment that is pushing these pills on women. So I was on the birth control pill myself for 12 years leading up to my cancer diagnosis. Turns out that the birth control pill is classified by the WHO, the World Health Organization, as a class 1 carcinogen, like tobacco, like asbestos. So, a class 1 carcinogen means that there is strong and sufficient evidence that it causes cancer in humans. Okay? Slightly concerning. I wasn't told that when I went on it. At no point in my process of being on it for a dozen years was that brought to my attention. It's basically, by definition, synthetic hormones, synthetic estrogen, synthetic progesterone, and it does increase the risk of breast cancer, cervical cancer, and liver cancer, which is a serious trade-off in spite of its potential to potentially decrease ovarian and endometrial cancer, but that trade-off is really never discussed. So what's going on here? Informed consent is really not on the table when that layer of the conversation isn't brought up at all. And it can contribute to mood disorders, blood clots, nutrient depletion, especially magnesium. And most people are magnesium deficient. Magnesium itself is implicated in over 300 bodily reactions. It can contribute, the birth control pill can contribute to gut imbalances as well. So when we look at the host of autoimmune conditions and the host of, chronic conditions that are occurring, we know that a lot of mood issues are also connected directly to the gut as well as autoimmune and chronic conditions. So if the birth control pill is affecting the gut, then could it be contributing to all of the above? Perhaps something to consider also because a lot of these chronic and autoimmune conditions are found predominantly in women. Makes you wonder. And the fact of the matter is, I didn't go on it for any serious issue personally. It is prescribed for irregular cycles, for PMS, for acne. I went on it for relatively irregular cycles for convenience purposes because I was a cheerleader and it was very inconvenient to not know exactly when it was coming. It helps to be able to plan that when you're in college and cheerleading, sometimes even on national television. I was a little concerned about that, and this was posed as a solution to that irregularity. And I took it just because it seemed like a normal, fine thing to do. And that's the only reason I was on it for as long as I was. So, and of course, then it became convenient to know that that risk wasn't there when I started to become intimate with partners and such, right? So, but the real issue wasn't that serious of an issue, right? So, those issues as well, irregular cycles, PMS, acne, those are actually signals of deeper issues that might require a little bit more inquiry, right? So the need to regulate hormones, perhaps balance your diet, detox, a simple detox. We know that an imbalanced gut can often cause acne, skin issues. So addressing nutritional deficiencies, perhaps as well, even nervous system regulation. So, all of those issues, those less serious issues that people might go on birth control for, women, of course, they're issues that really should be addressed more naturally. But of course, that is not how our medical system works. That is not how the machine works. So then we look at PCOS and fertility issues on the rise. This is related to endocrine disruption and processed food in many cases. Many women are finding that when they change their diets, when they go all natural, when they focus on herbs and nutrition, and all of this, addressing the actual deficiencies in their system, those issues resolve themselves. When they heal their body naturally, PCOS, fertility issues, they resolve themselves. When they release the stress in particular, those issues resolve themselves. So, these are huge layers that need to be addressed if we're going to bring a balanced conversation to the table. Because how much are these synthetic hormones impacting women and their ability to really be in their body, to be connected to themselves, and to even choose the right mate? Is that contributing to these quote unquote gender wars? And then we have men going down to the fundamental level of circumcision. Now, this may be a little controversial for some people, but I have seen men sharing about this, and I think it's a topic that needs to be, again, brought to the fore a little bit more. So, I just saw a post earlier before I put this episode together. It was something I was going to touch on, but then I decided to bring some of the deeper details to the table as well. So there is evidence, there is studies that show that when you circumcise a male, a tiny infant, mind you, this hardwires males for self-destruction and impaired emotion processing due to damage in the amygdala. This is a serious trauma occurring to infants as soon as they are brought into the world. The birth process itself can be highly traumatic, and then immediately you're chopping off part of the body. They can say it's kind of a, less important part of the body, but that is traumatic. Babies scream when this happens. And I mean, imagine somebody doing this to an adult. It's really interesting to take a step back and look at it from a less filtered lens where it's so normalized in our culture that we don't really take a step back and think about it. But the amygdala is the center for anger. It's the center for trauma. It's the center for the emotional processing response. So when you affect the amygdala at birth, you're affecting the impulse control of that male child who doesn't have the capacity to properly emotionally regulate, to properly regulate that trauma, that serious trauma to the body when they're that tiny. So this impacts the pain pleasure reversal system, and it really is a form of trauma-based mind control. The more trauma a system holds, the more trauma a system carries without being processed and integrated or processed and let go of, then the more that they're able to be mind controlled, because this is how our system operates. When we're in a state of fear, survival, constriction that is often rooted in trauma, we're more susceptible to mind control. So Then we also look at the fact that the quality of pregnancy is affected directly by the quality of male sperm. So that's another issue that I've seen several people speaking of lately, but is not really widely known. So preeclampsia is directly connected to the father's health. The placenta is built from his genetic material. Morning sickness is influenced by paternal DNA. So when we look at all of these issues, then we're really starting to paint a fuller picture of how the biological chemical warfare, how the system itself is set up to really pit us against each other, but also to keep us out of our power, to keep us in a state of trauma, to keep us in a state of pain. When pregnancy is such a difficult process, when birth is such a difficult process, then a lot of women are going to resent it. They're not going to become the nurturing mothers that they could be. It's going to affect motherhood. It's going to affect the pregnancy. It's going to affect the health of the child. So then we get into birth medicine, and the literal control of creation itself is really what we're getting to the root of. So the medical industrial complex controls birth. It controls the feminine womb gate when you really look at it. And a lot of the doctors giving birth at the hospitals, or not giving birth, but assisting birth, are male. They have no genuine understanding of what it's like because they don't give birth. And so they're completely disconnected from the process. They're the ones dictating how the process is going to go. There has been a massive rise in C-sections as well as induction. And the trauma imprint of birth is rising with every generation, with every year, it seems. It seems like I think I heard a statistic and I forgot to write it down, but if I recall correctly, it was about 50% of hospital births are now C-section. Why do they do that? It's not really because of medical necessity, although if our pregnancy quality is declining, it could be part of it. But let's address that at the root, right? Let's go back to more natural. But why the rise in C-sections? Well, consider how much more money the hospital makes from a C-section than from a natural birth. And then look at the fact that hospitals are an industry. And it's not just the hospital fees for the C-sections, but the placenta and the umbilical cord fluid, the cord blood. The placenta carries a street value of $50,000. Think about that for a second. What are they really doing with those placentas? This is why that conversation is also coming to the fore in more natural circles of allowing the placenta and cord to stay attached to the baby. There's a very real reason they remain attached at birth. It's because there still needs to be fluid transferred from the placenta through the cord to the infant. So many nutrients are held in that placenta. So there's also then a lack of support for postpartum care and the feminine healing, the mother healing. It takes a village, right? Well, everybody's been so isolated from each other. Women are expected to do it on their own. The father has to go back to work immediately. She only gets 3 months of maternity leave, usually on average, and in the US anyway. 6 months if she's very lucky. And motherhood as a whole has just been cast aside and devalued. So, all of these are conversations that warrant an entire podcast episode unto themselves, honestly. But again, I'm trying to paint a fuller picture of this issue at hand, of how these gender wars are actually being perpetuated at a very insidious, fundamental level of biology and chemistry and impacting the literal process of birth and creation and the way that the man and the woman even come together in the first place. So, this is really weaponized identity, divide and conquer agenda, but going even deeper. It's an agenda that is creating confusion and fragmentation around sex, around gender, around embodiment, and it's getting to us at the literal level of biology. So then we're getting into the issue of transhumanism as the deeper agenda behind the gender confusion. Again, a controversial topic warranting perhaps multiple podcast episodes. But This is really something that we've got to look at. If our gender is being manipulated, if our gender identity, if our biology is being manipulated from conception and all throughout childhood and beyond, what is really influencing our sexual preferences, our sexual identities, even? Is it as natural as they're making it out to be? That it's normal to have this gender confusion. I don't think it's as biologically normal as they're making it out to be. I don't think this is social progress so much as societal manipulation. So we're seeing sacred rage bubbling to the surface as trans women are taking the podium as well. And, I think women have every right to be extremely angry about that. And it's reverse feminism in action. And I did speak into that in the last episode, so I won't go super deep, but we're seeing this divide and conquer at every level, at the global level, at the interpersonal level, at the spiritual level, at the biological level. Disconnection within ourselves, disconnection from our true natural biology, disconnection from our spiritual essence. And yes, it's geopolitical as well. We're seeing so much rage about the Palestine issue. And it's horrific. I honestly, I haven't even been speaking into this because there's so much going on, and there are so many issues at hand, but this is tied into the greater issues of divide and conquer. That's the geopolitical level. And what I'm feeling is that a lot of us are processing this collective rage, this collective grief, because again, rage is usually a cover for deep, deep grief. And so some of us are processing that literally through our wombs, in private, in our own processes, processing grief and rage that nobody else is seeing publicly. But we're processing deep, deep collective wounds that go beyond this lifetime. But these media narratives are also designed to keep genders at war with each other, to keep races at war with each other, to keep nations divided and fighting amongst each other. And what is it all doing? Who is that serving? It's serving the beast, it's serving the machine, it's serving the system. And so this is why I titled the episode Rage Against the Machine. We have to understand the sacred rage underlying all of this is a deep, visceral, soul level rage that is rising up. And we're being told to point the fingers at each other when really it's because of the workings and manipulation of the puppets pulling the strings above, quote unquote. But really, the ones who are perpetuating these agendas have no essence of their own, and they must siphon off the human population. So that's the deeper esoteric stuff. But I want to segue into the sacred rage of the feminine and the sacred rage of the masculine that is coming up. And I am going to focus a little bit more on the feminine here, and I'm going to share another couple paragraphs from my book here. Sorry, I'm not completely set up here, so um, I have my blurred background. But yeah, there is so much to discuss with this stuff. So, the wounded feminine is really processing rage from thousands of years of suppression, of mutilation, of abuse, of silencing, and I don't know if I can say that out loud without being censored on certain platforms, but grape, right? Oh my gosh, I know people say that in place of that word. And then the wounded masculine. We cannot ignore the fact that the masculine is very justified in his rage as well. And when I say the masculine and the feminine, I don't mean individual men, I don't mean individual women. I mean the masculine energy, the feminine energy that we all contain. But yeah, we've got to really acknowledge the rage on both sides if we're going to actually ever be able to make progress and resolve some of these deeper issues. So, the rage from castration, from literal birth. I mean, Can we take a moment and process what that would be like for a tiny infant that has just entered the world rather rudely into a brightly lit hospital room that is cold and with machines and unnatural lighting to exit the womb into that energy and then experience the trauma of having a part of you removed? Imagine that is your entry into the world. The masculine also carries a lot of shame, a lot of suppression of emotion, and being blamed for the collective harm. Not all men, right? Just like it's not all women, not all men, not all women. We have to remember that. There is also some of the bigger, deeper elephants in the room here. The rise in male suicidality, is that a word? The rise in male suicide rates and the rise in male depression because of all this suppression. The disconnection of the male, the isolation, the shame, that really builds up into rage or depression. And the two often go hand in hand. So we have to have compassion for each other because we are both carrying very heavy burdens, both the masculine and the feminine. So both genders are hurting, and yet we have been pitted against each other. And we're seeing this in the rise in divorce rates and the complete breakdown of dating culture. But let's look at the divorce rates. So it's kind of looking like, if you look at the divorce rates from a straight numbers perspective, it is kind of looking like women would be the problem, right? Because if you look at in heterosexual versus homosexual marriages, and then you look at gay men versus women, lesbian marriages. So we have the divorce rates amongst gay men are about 20 to 30%, depending on what study you're looking at. Amongst heterosexual marriages, 40 to 50%. Okay, so man and man, lower, man and woman, higher. And then we get to lesbians. So women, it's 70% plus. So based on those numbers alone, just at face value, it would seem that women are the problem. However, when we look at the amount of unprocessed rage and suppression and how far back this goes for women, we've got to have compassion for ourselves and for the women in our lives. Whether you're a male or a female, we've got to honor that so many people are carrying so much trauma. It's no wonder that women are having a harder time grappling in this modern society where we're also told that we have to be independent and that we have to carry this all on our own shoulders. That to be a strong woman is to be a boss babe and to do it all, to be a mother, to be a lover, to be a wife, to also have a boss babe badass career, or else you're really not keeping up with the Joneses, right? So rage itself is not evil. It is not bad. It is energy distorted, however, when it is not honored, when it is not processed in an integrated manner. So, underlying the rage is unprocessed and unexpressed grief, pain, deep emotional wounds, and trauma. And this is what we really have to acknowledge and recognize. And this is why we really have to take a step back and allow ourselves, we have to take sacred responsibility for that sacred rage to process it in a healthy manner and not project it and spew it onto others. And to be able to hold the space, especially if we're in a relationship, to allow a safe container for your partner to grieve whatever is underlying that rage and to not duck and run and to not project and to not get triggered and to remember that it's usually not about the other person. It's usually not about the mirror in front of you. And so this is again that sacred responsibility on both parts. So getting deeper into the woman, the desecration of the feminine is real. You know, as a woman, I have been going through this process very deeply myself, and I've been doing it on my own. And this isn't to say that we have it worse, but I do think that this has to be a really acknowledged part of the conversation for men to recognize the burden that women do carry because we carry it in silence. We've been carrying it in silence for many millennia. So, this is not just from this lifetime. This is very deep stuff, too, that gets into trafficking and hybridization, the siphoning of womb codes going back millennia through multiple generations and through multiple timelines. This is how the entire patriarchy has been operated by siphoning and inverting womb codes, creation codes, the desecration of the womb and the life and life itself as the female principle has been pillaged. So it's real. And in our modern day and age, that feminine rage is looking at our system. And without even conscious awareness, sometimes it's saying, this is not right. We look at the education system of indoctrination and the vaccines required for children to enter it, and the genocide and starvation of children occurring on the other side of the world right now as we speak. That's not okay. None of it is okay. And I don't care what your politics are. I don't care what your religious beliefs are. There is no justification for genocide. And females are also, we have been in a victim mindset. And so we've got to take responsibility for that, a sacred responsibility for that. Across the board, this victim mindset has been kind of deliberately perpetuated as well. There is a real pain and shame and wounding carried by both genders, and a victim mindset has been pushed on both sides as well. But we do have ancient ancestors going back before the fall of the goddess culture and the rise of the patriarchy. Women have ancestors who were druids and priestesses, and they were cherished and honored for their power. And so now it's time to reclaim that inner aspect of self that is connected to those codes. But we also have to give each other time and space to do that processing required to remember that access. So back in the day, women could inherit property. And the Salem witch trials, which I did mention in the last episode, but I'm going to share it again. It was on one level a land grab, a way to bury women or, financially or energetically or even literally straight up burn them at the stake. So they were hunting not just women, but the land that they owned. They were hunting real estate. So in the 1600s, there was Puritan law, so women weren't allowed to own real estate unless they inherited it, either from a husband or from their parents when they passed. So they were essentially hunting property owning women, the widows and the single women in society. So just being accused was enough to seize the land, and it would go to the church, the community leaders, or even the family of the accusers. No evidence required. It's kind of insane. So guilty until proven innocent. And how do they prove their innocence? They would have to use witchcraft to do that because it was impossible to survive drowning with a stone, right? Like, it was insane. So essentially, women are carrying the generational pain in our wombs, the ancestral rage as well of being suppressed, of not having any rights, of never being able to express the suppression, but also the straight up abuse that many women have carried silently through the generations. So, again, I want to be really clear that this isn't about the man, but it's about the masculine principle. Women have been mistreated, manipulated, used, abused, betrayed. Many have been assaulted and raped, and worse, It's really quite dark when you look at it, and women are not the weaker sex. They're meant to be revered, but there is a very real biology. We are strong in many, many ways, and I'm 5'2" on a good day. I've experienced a lot of the above myself. I am holding womb healing sessions with women, and these women are coming to me with really deep stuff. And I deeply honor them for having the capacity to step forward and do the work. But it's this generation, in this day and age, these generations that are awake, that it is all coming to a head within us. Our wombs are saying enough and it's time to process it. And part of that processing is really feeling that pain and that rage that was never able to be expressed by our mothers, our grandmothers, our great grandmothers, and even further back. So these emotional wounds and traumas remain in our bodies, but many of us have also experienced this in this lifetime. Not feeling safe around men is a very real reality that many women face, that many women experience. And our pain hasn't been safe to be expressed. Generations of women were never able to safely express their rage, and so we're carrying it all. And we're reaching a culmination point, a breaking point, even. It's all coming out all at once. And it has to. It's a good thing. But as we do so, we're experiencing the chaos of the collective as it's all being released and coming up to the surface all at once. We're even seeing this in Mother Earth herself, releasing with all of the weather and the earthquakes and the volcanoes. And as I'm recording this, there was just that tsunami warning because of that massive, massive earthquake, like a nearly a 9.0 off the coast of Russia. And so Mother Earth is rumbling because she's like, I have to purge this. I cannot hold on to this any longer. And so, as above, so below, as within, so without, we're feeling this palpably in the collective. So these systems, patterns, societal, religious, and cultural conditioning structures normalized women feeling unsafe. These are being broken down now. Women have felt unsafe. We have felt unheld, unprotected for years, lifetimes. And we have also put walls up as we've had to navigate life alone. We've been told to boss babe and be independent. And that has been celebrated by celebrity culture. Meanwhile, many women are suffering and are now kind of full of resentment because it's been too much to carry all on our own. We're carrying everything on our shoulders and we're like, we can't do this anymore. And so a lot of that is being expressed as rage projected onto the masculines who aren't stepping up. And we're like, come on, dudes, where are you at? What are you doing? We can't do this on our own anymore. And a lot of us have been taking up the torch from a space of integrated responsibility, doing our best to process what we need to process. And we're like, okay, we're exhausted now. I'll just be honest. It's been exhausting. And, we basically need a true masculine energy to be able to hold us in a safe container to process, to hold and witness in the pain and allow the expression of the fear, the insecurity, the doubt until she can feel calm and regulated again. And then when she is grounded and in a state of regulation, well, guess what? She makes life that much better for the masculine as well. So, we have to look at it from this deeper lens, this deeper perspective, that there is a lot going on underneath the surface that has to be examined. So, a masculine is meant to be her partner and her protector, not just there for fun, right? So, there's deep father wounds that have to be examined, deep mother wounds on both sides of the spectrum, right? That contribute to all of this. But this is also the patriarchy wounds. This is also the toxic feminine wounds of feminism, right? So the masculine in our collective, if we're going to be honest, though, it's the masculine energy. The patriarchy has essentially failed in supporting the feminine essence. So it has done the exact opposite, and it has not just suppressed her, but pillaged her. It has desecrated and abused the feminine, including Mother Earth herself. So we've got to just be honest about this fact. It's the feminine principle that has been suppressed. And yes, this is something that I dive deeper into in my book and the patriarchy and the paradigm of separation and the rise of the divine feminine chapters. I look at this from the energetic perspective in a deeper dive. And I'll read a couple of those paragraphs in a moment. But it has been an immensely painful and lonely journey for many women. Many women are out there still projecting onto men, but please understand there is a vast collective of women on the path of the sacred feminine, choosing to lean in and really do this deeper work. And it's really painful, it's really challenging. And they have been doing so quietly, in silence. They have not been projecting their pain out into the world. The ones who are really walking the walk, they've been holding themselves through the process as they purge the pain of not just their own past, but their own lineage, or not even just their own lineages, but the pain of the collective as a whole as well. So transmuting a lot and really not having much of a support system in place as they do so. So, processing all of this while attempting to function in this world, keep a roof over our heads, and straight up survive in many cases, no support, and often outright rejection and projection from those around us because they don't understand this process. Their own shadows rise up too, and sometimes it's just too much to handle, and yet we've had no choice but to handle it, right? They're processing the depths of pain that are unfathomable to many. And so I had to bring this up as part of the conversation, not to compare and contrast too much, but to really just anchor this in for people who don't necessarily understand this process and how deep some of these energetics really run. For a lot of the feminine collective, it has been a really challenging journey. And if we're going to be honest, a lot of men really do need to put aside their pride and their ego and remember what their true purpose and role here is, which is really to protect and to provide for the feminine. And to really step into their sacred responsibility and to support the feminine in this processing of the rage. Because as the feminine heals, the man will then have the time and the space to rise up and embody in his authenticity, in his leadership energy to heal. A lot of women genuinely feel unsafe around men because they've had alcoholic fathers, they've been catcalled on the street and harassed, they have dealt with literal sexual assault and abuse, and bitterness can seep in, and fear and walls are put up, and also it's generational. So when you are hurt and you do not heal, the pain of that wound ingrains itself ever more deeply, suppressed until it seeps into your bones often, and it becomes part of your personality, angry, cynical, bitter. So why are so many women so angry? It's because they never felt safe. They never felt safe to process. They never felt held, protected, provided for. And so this isn't to point fingers, to blame, or to shame, but to really highlight the amount of pain and wounding that the woman is carrying, that the feminine is carrying. And then on an esoteric level, the amount of abuse and hijacking of the womb truly is unfathomable. Many people still have no idea the depths of desecration that has occurred on this planet. It's horrendous. It's horrific what has happened to the woman, to the womb, to the sacredness of our holy essence, to the sacredness of life, the source and portal of life. And so, again, we've got to transmute this sacred rage into sacred responsibility and stop pointing fingers, stop blaming and shaming, and ask each other, what do you need? What do you need to heal? How can I help you? How can I support you? And allow it to be a mutual process. So, this is really about stepping into a process of inner alchemy, of alchemical healing, and reclaiming that rage, allowing ourselves to process it, reclaiming the sacredness of that rage so that we can transmute it, so that we can clear it, so that we can really step into our wholeness and remember our joy and our purity and innocence. Because I don't know about you, but this journey has been really exhausting. And I think a lot of us just want to live. And At the same time, we're here to create a world that is based in peace and harmony, where all feel safe and the children can run free and live in joy once again. So, how do we do that? We've got to do the inner alchemy, we've got to do the inner healing, and we've got to reclaim and restore our inner wholeness. So, rage is really this sacred fire that is there to burn away the pain, the shame, the guilt, the grief. So much grief underlying all of this. So, it's to purify, it's to protect, it's to reveal that deeper truth of what's really going on underneath there. So, we've got to feel it to heal it, right? The only way out is through. So, this is very much about integrating soul fragments and being honest about our emotions, and also allowing that space for forgiveness of self, forgiveness of other, but not bypassing either. Not just saying, oh, it's okay. No, it's saying it's really not okay, but I forgive you because I have to let this go. I can't hold on to the poison of bitterness, the poison of resentment any longer. The forgiveness is for you, not always for the other person. Sometimes you're not even going to forgive them in person, right? But sometimes that heart to heart conversation will heal the rift, right? We are here to heal the rift. This is what we have to do to come into wholeness within and without. So, processing rage can lead to divine union within, that masculine feminine balance. This is often what is in the way, the lack of processing of the rage, the deep resentment, the pain, and the lack of forgiveness. So, this will also help us to reconnect to the natural rhythms, the earth cycles, and organic sovereignty when we really reclaim our power. And this rage, this grief, if we really allow ourselves to process it, this is how we reclaim our power. So, this is, in a way, a sacred rebellion against all that has been pushed on us, telling us that this other person is the problem, and we've got to keep, projecting onto the other side, this versus that, this war and that war and that war. No more war, no more war consciousness, no more separation consciousness. It's time to heal that rift, right? So, this is a time to detox, to feel, to reclaim, to remember. But sometimes we've got to go through and feel the rage. I have literally yelled at God a few times in the last several weeks, and it just came out of a deep well of suppressed stuff that I didn't even know was still there. And then I realized it wasn't even rage at God, it was rage at the false gods. It was rage at the false system, is rage at the false machine, right? So rage against the machine, maybe you want to actually put that song on and just rage in your room or whatever. I actually, I always have a memory that comes up when I think of that song. I was studying abroad in Paris many years ago, and I had a cheeky night out at a club in central Paris nearby, kind of hidden off like in the underground basement, but it was a fancy club. And all of a sudden this song came on. And I had had perhaps one drink too many, but I just let loose and I had the most fun I've ever had dancing like a wild child on the dance floor. Dun 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 dun. Like in the name. I just like let it rip, And I mean, sometimes I kind of go wild when I dance. Like you might not see that here on screen, but I've got depths and layers to me. I love dancing. And yeah, that is like a core memory of mine. And I can get so into it when that song comes on. It's just like, at the core of my being. And I think all of us have a little bit of that inner fire that just wants to come up to be really, I'm not even, no, not really. That's a bit of a spell itself, but to be cleared, to let it out, to let it up and out, and to just like feel that fire sometimes. And then like we come into our body a little bit more deeply after that. So, I would love to hear in the comments if you're here on if you're on YouTube or if you're, watching on listening on another platform, feel free to also reach out to me. I would love to hear how all of this is landing with you, how you've been feeling lately in these collective energies, the rage, if that's been coming up for you, how you've processed it for yourself. Yeah, there is a lot. There is a lot here. And if there's any aspect of this episode that you do want me to address in more depth and nuance, then please feel free to reach out and share or comment below. Yeah, and then feel free to share this episode. And the next episode, I'm going to get deeper into the sacred feminine aspects of the Sophia and the Magdalene. And in the meantime, yeah, because I've been processing so much. I was really feeling into things, but I have been literally in the depths of initiation of the Defense Against the Dark Arts stuff. And I have decided officially to push back the date for the first one to August 12th. And the date for the second one is the same, September 9th. And as soon as you register, though, what I've been working on in the back end is a shielding and clearing process, a daily shielding and clearing process. Trust me, some of the stuff that has been coming through is so wonky. So, what I'm doing is I'm compiling like a script, like a list even for people to clear themselves of a lot of this stuff because honestly, in the midst of all this, I didn't get so deep into the esoteric stuff, but there is literal spiritual warfare going on in these etheric realms that is affecting our behavior as well. We're talking implants, we're talking spells, we're talking programs. So what we need to do is to be able to clear our field so that we're in our sovereign energy to actually process what's actually inside and to let it go. But how do we do that? If we're trapped in these programs, it's not as easy. So the shielding helps to stop those layers of distorted frequencies and distortion energies from coming in and interfering with our own natural organic processes. And so this is the foundation. This is a daily practice, daily that I do. And, I've been doing it for a while now, and even more stuff has been coming through. And last night I had another piece come through, and once I cleared that, it's like everything else went more intense. And I was like, oh my, I wasn't able to get to the certain layers because this other layer was there that I wasn't able to see until I got to this process last night. And so I'm in real time walking this walk with you and sharing in real time all of the things that I'm learning. But this masterclass is going to be basically level one. And it's really important, I feel, for everybody that's alive right now. And then for those who really want to go deeper, there will be other practices that I'm not going to share in this particular masterclass series because they're really, really in depth and nuanced, and not everybody necessarily is going to be there right now, but at least to have this foundation in place and at least this clearing process. And the inner temple, you'll get access to all of this as well. And yeah, I'm sharing so in depth in this episode because I just feel that there's a lot of manipulation and control, mind control stuff that is causing a lot of these rifts, a lot of this gender warfare, so so to speak, and the battle of the sexes, like all of these battles and warfare, it's partially rooted in this mind control, this manipulation that is going on a much broader level than we even know, than we even realize. And perhaps at some point in the future, I'll share about the process that I've been going through. It's definitely not time quite yet, but it's been really wild, really incredibly wild. But yes, and if anybody feels called to do a one-on-one, it's not just womb restoration that I do, but we get really deep It's really intense work, but it's been really powerful. And the women, especially who have been coming to me for those sessions, it's been really profound. And I'm really honored and humbled by those who have been coming through. And yeah, also just, for the men out there too, we can get into, for everyone, we can get into past life, deeper karmic layers. That's the point of the work that I do, is getting to the root. I don't even like to call it healing. It's multidimensional. Field work is one term that some people use, but it's multidimensional getting to the root work. And that's otherwise, we can be stuck in these healing loops, right? And so we're here to break the cycles, break the loops. And that's what my mission has been, and that's part of mastery. But yeah, we live in a very complex reality, and I just am ready for it to be simple again, beautiful, magical, whole. So thank you for being on this journey with me as we navigate these incredibly challenging and complex times. I honor you for being here if you're still here at the end of the episode, but for, tuning in to the episodes that you have been, thank you so much. And if you're new here, welcome. And thank you for being here as we journey home to the heart of truth here on this podcast. And I forgot to introduce myself in the beginning. But I am Amanda. Welcome. I am so honored and grateful to have you here. Onward and upward in love and light as we journey home to the heart of truth. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for tuning in to the Heart of Truth podcast with your host, Amanda Erin Kelly. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating or review on your favorite platform. And if you'd like to go deeper, grab your copy of my book, Let There Be Light, and join us inside the free community in Illumina Wisdom School, where you can access free resources to jumpstart your journey, such as a higher self activation and the Body Temple Blueprint Masterclass, as well as explore the plethora of resources, including Awakening Fundamentals and Luminary, my signature path to wholeness and mastery, to help you become your own healer and sovereign authority. You can access everything at thisartcalledlife.com or find the links down in the show notes below. Until next time, onward and upward in love and light as we journey home to the heart of truth.